Hey everyone, I'm Charlie Moses, founder of Sick Futures Collective and the host of this podcast, The Future is Sick. Today I'm joined by Naya Wright, and I'm going to read her bio because she's got so much good stuff going on, and I don't want to slip up on any of it. So here it is. Naya is a PhD student in the Anthropology and Social Change Department at CIIS, the California Institute of Integral Studies, where she researches ontology, epistemology, and how multicultural perspectives can reshape the way we understand illness and the body. She operates from the understanding that everything is spiritual in nature and interconnected, a framework that shapes how she analyzes the relationship between environment, chronic illness, and what we even mean when we talk about the body. She also brings lived experience with chronic illness to this conversation. So I'm really excited to have Naya here. She's got a brilliant and beautiful mind, and I just cannot wait for this conversation. So let's get going. Hi, Naya. Thanks for being here.
Hey, Charlie, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm so excited that you were down to do this. Naya and I are at CIIS together, both studying anthropology and just like in the thick of it, really is how it feels. But could you introduce yourself, like your name, your pronouns, where you're based, the work you're doing right now?
Sure. My name is Naya. I use she, her pronouns. I'm based in DC right now, but I kind of hop around the East Coast because I have family spread out all over the place. Let's see. In school, I'm working on a little bit of everything. I think Charlie nailed it. And outside of school, I work in green infrastructure. So I've been working on stormwater management, rainwater collection, and trying to regreen the city so we can
Dang.
have some clean, drinkable water for years and years to come.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. I don't think I knew that at all.
It's very new, so it's also
Oh,
interesting to say that like out loud. The last intensive we had, we ended up watching a movie, and that was the whole thing, and it just clicked. No, I think I could do this like right now. I don't even have to wait to finish what I'm working on in class, and
mhm.
that took off. So,
Wow. Oh, that's so great. Yeah, congrats on that. I mean, yeah,
yeah.
it's like clean drinking water is like of the utmost importance right now, I feel, like above many things.
Yeah,
Um,
and I think it's helpful too, to kind of zoom in sometimes because we're systems thinkers. We like to figure out how everything plays together, and so the big one is, oh, climate change and let's save the planet. And yes, let's do all of those things, but how? And so
mhm,
rainwater is kind of my entry point, and I figured out that was at least a thing to focus on in the meantime.
mhm.
There are lots of things to focus on, so.
Yeah.
That's my one piece of advice for any big problem is like find the piece that seems cool to you and then do that.
Yeah. Oh my God, majorly. It is like the tried and true method of being like, narrow your focus, find that one thing that you are just like so invested in, and just like keep at it forever.
Forever and ever and ever until you feel
Yeah.
called to do something else. And then scrap the whole thing and find a new hyperfixation.
Yeah, for sure. Like every 5 to 10 years or so, it's fine. Well, with that, I mean, your research is kind of grounded in the idea that there's this interconnection to everything, that everything is spiritual in its nature. Do you remember kind of how you came upon that framework? If you have always kind of operated under that framework, maybe how it shapes like your work that you're doing right now, work that you had done in the past?
Yeah, I mean, formally, I think when I started to notice it was probably back in undergraduate studies. I had a really cool mentor in African-centered psychology at Howard University, and he exposed me to the Ubuntu model, which I could drone on and on about that for hours, but I won't go too far into detail about that now. But the framework was essentially that before colonization, various communities had it baked into their language and their worldview that everything in existence is of the same like core substance. It's just
Mhm.
slight differences in how we all manifest these unique qualities of the same core substance. And I didn't really understand it at 18, but I was obsessed with it. I was like, that sounds cool. I think I could explore that further. And so 10 years later, I have all of these words, and apparently that's like questions of epistemology and ontology and what's the nature of being? And all I remember is being 18, just saying, yeah, that resonates. Let me look a little further into it. But then if you ask my mom, like, she calls me her earthy, crunchy kid, and I always wanted to run around barefoot in the leaves, and it's probably more comfortable pretending I could talk to a bird or a deer than like actually socializing. So if you let her
Mhm.
tell it, she's not even a little bit surprised that we landed here.
Oh my God. Yeah. Okay. You and I have a lot in common then. I was like, if I could just be in nature 100% of the time and like covered in like birds landing on my shoulders and hands and like picking up snakes and like climbing trees, I would have been in like the most ideal existence in life.
Oh, for sure. My go-to is like the witch's potions. And there was this
Yeah.
I had a neighbor a couple doors down, and she had these like huge hedges with berries on it. To this day, don't know what the berries were. They were probably slightly poisonous, actually. Because the one thing our parents told us, they were like, "Okay, we know you're in your kitchen. Please don't eat the bright red, questionable looking berries that we can't identify."
Oh, yeah. No, that's so funny. Yeah, my cousin and I made potions. That was our thing. We would just go outside and scavenge anything and we just like cram rhododendron in them, which is like highly toxic. Foxglove, also highly toxic, and had like a bathroom cabinet full of highly toxic potions. The best, the best things. Let's see. So like, I guess with bringing in chronic illness and your experience with chronic illness, understanding environmental implications and that connection between environmental exposure and chronic illness, kind of when did that start landing with you or kind of hitting home?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I was kind of an oddball kid, so a lot of my answers will be similar, but I think there was some version of me that always knew and could feel it, and it took getting a little bit older to be able to put words to it. But
Mhm.
I was diagnosed with asthma at 6 months old. So before I was talking, walking, like for me, this is core memory as long as I've been alive. And so with that, most of the time I feel completely normal, or at least my version of normal, which according to my doctors, my baseline for normal is very skewed from the rest of the population. But again, this has been my whole life. So I'm just like, I don't know, this is the best I can breathe half of the time. So there's the normal baseline, and I'm pretty active and I can move around and I'm really not giving it much thought. And then I'll
Mhm.
walk into a dusty room, or I'll go to someone's house with a pet, or the temperature skyrockets, and all of a sudden
Mhm.
I'm hospitalized and gasping for air. And so I think there's always been an element of kind of realizing, okay, there are some spaces I can go and be completely fine, and there are others where I'm immediately going to struggle to breathe, and that's going to be top of mind. And then, you get older and you go to school, and we're learning about, environmental pollution and asthma rates clustering in different cities. And I'm like, oh, so it's not just me. Like, this is quite a large phenomenon that's happening on a massive scale, to the point that the fact that we have such a polluted environment is probably a big reason why I can even say I was diagnosed with asthma at 6 months old. Um, Both of my parents grew up in cities, and so one of them, my mom grew up in Camden, New Jersey, and there's a
Mhm.
huge like waste management plant, and we would go up every weekend to visit my grandmother. And we're kids, we don't know any better. So we're on the highway, and as we're driving, we're like, I know I'm close to grandma's house. I see the big pink smoky building. And then you get older and you're like, oh, the big pink smoky building is 3 blocks away from my grandmother's house and is pumping out what who knows what kind of toxic sludge and it's just been there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. I think it's like it's fascinating in biomedicine how we are so conditioned to be like, oh, it's the individual, or it's like it's family history, and that bringing up environmental pollution or just pollution in general is like, huh, what? Like when talking to like any biomedical doctor or like the system of it, it's just not necessarily addressed until you like peel open like half a layer and you're like, oh, there it all is. Like
Hmm.
there's an explanation for like generations of violence and harm. Got
Yeah,
it.
and the explanation's always there, but and I think this is something our program does really well is bringing in lived experience. I've really been enjoying kind of sitting at this intersection of saying, oh, here are all of these things that I noticed that were just kind of weird growing up that I never gave any thought to because that's just what it was. And then
Hmm.
there's this whole body of literature and several different discourses and different perspectives.
Hmm.
We're like, oh no, this isn't just happening. Like this came from somewhere.
Yes, gosh. Yeah, what initially drew you to this department at CIIS to the Anthropology and Social Change program?
Yeah, so that's actually a really funny story. I don't know if I was drawn to this program so much as the program chose me.
Uh-huh.
Um, Again, shout out to my wonderful mentor in undergraduate studies. We did these Saturday kind of weekend development labs, and they were really casual, just a couple students that wanted to read and discuss ideas, and
Uh,
it went from there. And most of my questions were just like, okay, you're telling me that everything is spiritual. So let's say I believe you, because I was still kind of a skeptic at this point too. Just like, all right,
mhm.
if that's true, what does that even mean? And if it's everything, then like, what is everything? Like, are the trees spiritual? Is that person across from me also spiritual? Is that electronic device sitting across from me some expression of spirituality? Like, what are the limits of this? And so
Yeah.
he's like, he's rooted in San Francisco too. And so he's like, the questions you're asking, I think this is your school. Like, you should go here. And I wrote it down on a post-it note, got lost in my stack of papers when I was moving out of my senior year apartment in like the rush of trying to figure out adulting. I went to a
Mhm.
whole other university for my master's because I think I was still I think I was still in the mind space of like academia has to look a certain way. And like these questions are fun, but this isn't rigorous. Like you
Right.
can't really experiment and study spirituality. Like that's just a thought. Newsflash, you can. But at the time, I went to a completely different school and the question would not leave me alone. And so I finished my master's degree. It was supposed to lead into a joint PhD, and I took a gap year. I was like, maybe I need to stop and figure this out. And the
Mhm.
post-it note just randomly pops up. Mind you, I've moved like 3 different times. It's in a random Ziploc bag sandwiched in between drawings from my brother when he was a kid and just shows up. I'm like, okay, this is weird, but I don't know. Like, I want to ask questions about spirituality. Maybe it's a sign. Let me look.
Mhm.
And so I humored it a bit, and I was debating between our department, anthropology, and the East-West psychology department because I was a
Yeah.
psychology major in undergraduate studies.
Mm.
And the thing that got me, it was such a minor difference, but after studying kind of all the individual internal psychological well-being side of things, the other
Mhm.
thing that I learned, which again, it was kind of like a side note to my undergraduate studies, but we had learned that a lot of like independent individual mental health is environmentally mediated. There are places you can go that are going to be really good for your mental health. There are things
Mhm.
you can do that are good for your mental health, and there are things that are not. So it's like, okay, well, if most of mental health really isn't something we control by ourselves, our environment influences it, maybe I want to work on building a system that encourages really good mental health. And so like that was the kicker. It's like, okay, I won't be a psychologist.
Mhm.
What's the big thing where I can do like systems? And I still didn't really have words for any of these things. It's like, okay, anthropology seems close enough. Like I'll figure it out when I get there. And then I did because we have great supportive faculty and great classmates, but it really was the most chaotic kind of convergence of things. And I was like, well, I might as well give it a try.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. No, I love it though. Yeah, I love the like post-it note unearthing itself at like just the right time. Being like, remember me? And you're like, oh yeah, I do. Hi.
Mhm. And it was so crazy because I had maybe like 3 days prior, I was thinking, all right, I'm at the end of my gap year. I've always wanted to be a doctor. I'm still really not sure. I'm definitely not going back to my other program. I don't know, like I'll think about it, but where would I even go? Holy Grail post-it note and random Ziploc bag. It's like, okay, I guess I'm doing this. And granted, this was 2 weeks before the application deadline on top of everything else. So it's like, I guess we're just doing this now.
Yeah, like quickly.
We
Oh,
we have too much time to think about it.
yeah, sometimes that's the best way. It's just shove yourself off the edge and go for it. Oh my
Definitely.
gosh.
Best choice
Yeah.
by far, but I don't know how much of a choice it was in the moment.
Yeah, yeah, I totally get it. I know my experience going into this program, I was so hesitant about it because I was coming from such a rigorous school prior, but it was such a bad fit. And I remember meeting with Andre and then meeting with Adrian Pine, who's this phenomenal critical medical anthropologist, and they were both like, "Get over here." And I was like, "I don't know." And it took me a year, but when I did, I was like, God, it was the best idea I've ever had. Like
I
this
love
is,
that. Andre got
yeah,
me too. He did my
yeah.
entrance interview, and
Hmm.
I was so disillusioned with academia at this point that I like made this commitment to myself. It's like, I'm not shortchanging anything. I'm telling these people exactly what it is I want to do, and they're either gonna love
Yeah,
it or hate it, but I want to know
yeah,
now. And I told
yeah,
him, and I was just like, listen, I'm a really political academic figure, and I want all of these things to shape the world. He's like, perfect. You found your people. Come here.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, for anybody listening, if you are unfamiliar with Andre Grubacek, look him up. He's this like incredible world historian. He's like a world systems theorist, anthropologist, activist, and just like one of the coolest, smartest people that you could ever be influenced by. I think he kind of like all of us are like, oh my God, he's incredible. Like it's without a doubt. Oh gosh. Well, okay. So in thinking about your research, because you're engaging questions of ontology and epistemology, which is like how we know what we know and also like what we believe exists, which is like very big systems thinking. And I guess my question then is like, how does your research or how do those questions around these things connect to how we understand illness and chronic illness and disease and disability, all of these things?
Oh, those are so many good questions.
Yeah,
I'm organizing them in my brain really quick to figure out which rabbit hole we're going to dive down.
totally.
Well, let's see. The main thread of my research right now is this idea of spiritual activism. Starting with clarifying what we mean by spiritual activism, because
Mm,
typically when that's referenced, what people mean is an internal experience, either religious or non-religious, but it's more of an internalized morality and it motivates them to take action in society towards making it a better place. And that's
mm,
great. But there's also another angle to that. And this is where kind of the multicultural perspectives come up, where um, spirituality extends beyond just an internal, like personalized experience that guides your own moral compass. It's the actual fabric of reality. And so, like, we dip into kind of consciousness studies and, you know, the girlies and the they thems and, TikTok, like, they'll maybe note more as manifestation. But I tend to look at these things that end up being broad cultural phenomenon, and instead of writing them off, I'm like, what is this getting at? Like, what does this mean
Mm,
to people? Because if the idea of manifestation does wind up being real, where it's like in mass, we all collectively come up with this idea and that shapes reality as we know it, and then that's what we see as our physical reality, then
mhm,
I think that becomes a different entry point of how to approach activism. And so for me, it's kind of reasserting like what comes first, instead of how do we make changes in the systems based on what we see. It's acknowledging that there are forces operating that we don't see all the time, but they still work in a very tangible, quantifiable way. And if we can understand that, we can kind of get in on a level that is maybe not so fraught with like conflict because there's not too many people operating there. And so I think my idea is that if it stands up, then it's efficient. And so then when we are tying it into illness and how we think of the body, um, I also conceptualize illness maybe a little bit differently than how it's popularly thought of. And so there's kind of the biomedical model where, the body is this collection of parts, and when one of the parts is malfunctioning, you get this collection of symptoms, and then we'll label it an illness.
mhm,
And yes, on one level, I think it does function that way. Um, but going back to kind of that interconnected, kind of underlying spiritual essence of everything, I've started to conceptualize it as it's mostly just our bodies alerting us to the fact that there's something wrong around us. And then
mm,
even a step further is that if everything's interconnected, then kind of the separation between forms is more of an illusion than a truth on a non-physical level. And if that's the case, where the idea of separation is an illusion, then
mm,
what I've been thinking is that illness and chronic illness and different injuries are just a manifestation of a piece of that system as a whole being disrupted. And so it's not this person is sick, it's basically the same way that we conceptualize illness as an individual, except I'm thinking of the body as kind of everything in existence. And so if we're just part of the earth, it's not Naya's lungs and Naya's body is sick. It's Naya, this aspect of the planet, is sick, and it's making the whole planetary system sick. And so, what
mm,
things do we need to fix in the whole system to then mediate this particular expression of illness? And then you get healthy people, but you also get healthy environment, healthy world systems. And so, it's
mm.
kind of a double-edged sword where I'm like, okay, localized problems are global problems, and so fixing one fixes the other. But if we approach it from the global, we help the local. And yeah, I think it can go both ways, but that's how I've been conceptualizing my research. And then that's also why I'm like, okay, if that's also true, there's a tool that we're not touching that most people also don't see coming. So we can kind of maybe use it to get some leverage early on before it ends up being this like open conflict battle of the wills of consciousness.
Oh my gosh, incredible. Yeah, like as you were speaking, I was thinking about or visualizing like, everybody and everything connected by like a series of threads and thinking of like, the thread that runs through all those who experience autoimmune disease, the thread that runs through all those who experience asthma or diabetes or whatever it might be, and like the connection that all of those people have to like that one experience of illness that the entire world or universe or existence is experiencing collectively and all together. But it's like the coolest, like ultra collective framing to really envision everything as being just one absolute unified thing, living
Yeah.
thing.
And I like questions of what even is this thing happening, because I think the way we conceptualize a problem shapes how we think of the solution. If I'm
Mhm.
thinking of illness as this is one thing experienced by one person, the
Mhm.
solution is, if it's diabetes, the solution is insulin. If it's asthma, the
Right.
solution is an inhaler or a nebulizer. And
Mhm.
most chronic illnesses have their thing, right? But if it's a
Mhm.
collective experience, the solution is not polluting the environment to the point of hurting people's lungs and uh, like supporting the food supply so that there's not as many triggering foods even being created and made available and sometimes the only options. And of course, that doesn't speak to every illness that exists. That's not my specialty, but I am curious what that opens up in terms of how do we address this issue if we're expanding beyond just what this one person can do to manage their symptoms in their space.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I just love it. And I feel like I'm like mind fucked a little bit trying to like really see it and envision it in that sense, which is wonderful because it is such an expansive and necessary framing to understand the systemic impact of the shape of the earth, the shape of the universe at large. I remember listening to, oh, I'm going to forget her name, but I feel like I've talked about this movie before, but it's Contact, the movie Contact, but it's the woman that the movie Contact or the book is based on. And she was part of, I believe it was a NASA project to be communicating or attempting to communicate with extraterrestrial life. But her framing of everything was like, we're not like, it's not just like humans and insects and mammals or whatever. She was like, it's earthlings. Like, we're all just earthlings, like collectively, like, be it like the plants or the rocks or the people or the other animals that exist, and trying to understand that kind of collective mentality I thought was just so important and crucial and necessary for our continued existence and survival as living things. I mean, it's just to see it as one whole is so necessary. And I wanted to ask, some of the or what some of the different cultures or traditions are that have kind of influenced you, or maybe the ways that they conceptualize what the body is like, and then of course what those frameworks or ideas or feelings reveal about Western biomedical lenses.
Sure. I'll say I'll keep it relatively broad because I wouldn't call myself a cultural expert yet. And I'm also a bit of a cultural generalist, but I think this has more to do with my own family history. And so my dad is African American, and my mother is Puerto Rican American, but her parents lived on the island.
Mm,
And there's some ideas floating around our family that at some point there was some indigenous continuity in the bloodline somewhere. But
mm,
the piece that sticks out to me is that on both sides of my family, there's really not a clear record of who we're connected to, who we come from, what our traditions were. There's just
mm,
this knowledge that like they were something else, and a relatively recent knowledge of there was something else we just don't know what the what else is. So I kind of grew up piecing things together through stories my aunts and uncles told, and I think that carries over into my studies now, where I'm kind of just
mm,
like, I don't know. I won't claim a group, but there's so many that exist. So what can be learned from everybody? And I tend to look for what are the underlying similarities. And I think it's because of my lack of rootedness in that way. Where I'm like, okay, I can't
mm,
point to a specific group, but there are things that resonate with me. It's just like being a person of this earth, that if we're going to recover it. That being said, there are some areas that I've kind of gravitated towards. And so, um, uh, various African indigenous groups. My earliest exposure was like again that Ubuntu framework, which is from like Swahili Bantu cultures, and that's the language group it comes from. So that's a general area to kind of get situated. And then I really enjoy studying various North American indigenous cultures, which again, there are so many, and they're definitely not a monolith. And so I kind of poke around and get a little taste of what different people are saying and try to paint a picture that way. And
mm,
then there's been Puerto Rican, Taino, indigenous cultures has been my latest kind of interest area because I think that's the one that resonates most closely with the stories my mother's side of the family has been telling. And then I recently took a course here at CIIS in Indigenous Lifeways, and I really enjoyed learning about, I might butcher this, I'm really bad at names, so sorry in advance, but the Maori people over
Mhm.
in Australia and New Zealand, they have a really rich, fascinating culture. Uh, and yeah, I think those are kind of the major geographic regions that I've looked into, but I will say I tend to keep it kind of broad. I hop around the continents, and I think as I learn more and I get more comfortable naming what I'm interested in, I
Mhm.
plan to specialize and make more connections with like local indigenous groups. But I had to get here first because, again, like with my family background, I think there's also some hesitation too to be like, guys, this resonates. Like, I can't really say I'm part of your community, but I'd really like to learn from you guys because it just something feels right here. And in some places that'll be enough, and in some it won't. But I think I had to at
Mhm.
least get to a point where I was confident, just saying like, well, I have as much as I have, and if you're open to it, I'm open to you. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, gosh. I mean, I'm also thinking about like futurism and bringing in traditions and different cultures and then trying to like produce work or research and do all of that like largely within an institution, a system that still operates under like Western scientific framework. And like granted, CIIS is kind of a different situation, but not, it's still within it. And are you finding, or I guess how are you finding kind of butting up against that and trying to like work around it with what it is that you're doing?
Yeah, I think a lot of that is me constantly reminding myself to try to walk between two worlds. And
Mm,
so my first experience with this actually wasn't even remotely academic. I was a behavioral technician working with toddlers diagnosed with autism. And
mm,
so we were on a team and we would develop behavioral intervention plans. And it started with kind of taking an assessment of, okay, where is this learner at right now? What skills do they have that we can build on? What skills are we working towards? And then we'd map out kind of what seems like a realistic goal, what's the lofty goals, but where do we want to get? And then my job was everything in between of how do we get from where we are to where we want to be and holding both of those truths at the same time. Like,
mm,
we're not there yet, but we can be, but we have to take really specific steps to get there. Um, and we have to take into account where we're starting at because one thing, especially working with young kids of any type of like neurotypes, that if you give them a task that's way beyond their ability to grasp, it's going to overwhelm them. I mean, even adults, like there are reasonable challenges, and then there's I'm overwhelmed, I'm shutting down, and I can never do anything ever. Like, you don't want to do that
right.
to people. And so you have to be able to hold both spaces. And
Hmm.
after that experience, I try to hold that with me in these academic spaces where I kind of look around and like, okay, this is what our culture and our systems look like and say right now. These are the tools we have available to us. This is where
Hmm.
we want to be. And I think that's actually the bulk of the research I've done so far is basically trying to even define like what is the where do we want to be.
Hmm.
And I don't think everyone works this way, and I don't think everyone needs to, but my brain works really, really well with having a roadmap. Even if the roadmap seems completely unfeasible, like I want to make that very clear. I love imagination. I love being crazy. Like shoot for the moon and then come up with a very detailed plan of how to get there. And so
Hmm.
I do a lot of research like what could the alternative look like? And then I draw on my RBT training and I say, okay, let's take a very, very honest audit about what we have going on right now. And like
Hmm.
informally, I kind of score it like, all right, here are the strengths of the university, here are its weak points. Here's how we can strengthen those weak points. Here's how we can use the strengths to do that. Here's where we might just want to exploit the weak point a little bit or completely disregard it because no one will notice. And I like to do that in culture too. It's like culture analysis, systems analysis. Like
Hmm.
Yeah, all of this exists and it's fine. And I think my own philosophy is I take it as seriously as I need to in order to leverage it as a tool. But I'm really committed to these alternative futures that I'm dreaming up with my classmates and my peers and my cousins and the random theorist on Instagram who has no credentials but is probably one of the wisest people I've ever heard. Because also, there are a lot of them. There are a lot that aren't. Please be discerning. But there are a lot of really wise people just out here saying things. And if you
Mhm.
take them seriously, it's as serious as you want to take it. And then it's just figuring out, like, all right, how do we build this thing? And how does it take shape and start to transform? And what are the baby steps to get from one place to another? And what are the non-baby steps? Like, there are some places where we're completely shortchanging ourselves because we think we have to have the whole thing figured out all at once. And it's
Mhm.
like, most change almost never happens that way. We're taught that it happens that way. It doesn't happen that way. Not in people, not in cultures, not in systems, not in ecosystems. There's always a tiny lever to pull that eventually cascades into the really big lever. So I look for really tiny levers to start pulling now, with always the thought of like, how does this create a bigger lever?
Yes. No, I know. I think that the like snowballing approach is to me the most motivating when you're like, okay, I'm ready. I'm getting some stuff done. Like I'm checking some boxes and we are making some progress here. And I guess I want to ask like, with that approach, with this worldview, with knowing as much as you do about Western biomedicine and having been, in it since you were 6 months old in a very intimate way, like, what do you envision or kind of where do you see or like desire the future to go in terms of care, in support, in well being, all of these things?
Oh, that's such a big question. I love it. That's a really big question.
Yeah.
I would love to see a future where, first of all, we collectively understand that we bear a communal responsibility for caring for one another, and
Mm,
taking that really personally. And I feel like that's already kind of an ambitious thing to say in our current cultural kind of character. We're very individualistic. I think it's shifting a bit after the pandemic, but I think we're also coming off of like a little bit of a social media movement of like, you don't owe anybody anything. Detachment is key, and that's how you elevate. Therapy speak kind of manipulated. It's like, let's set boundaries for your own well-being. And I think that's
uh,
all good advice, but I think too much of a good thing can always be a bad thing. Um,
mhm.
because the much trickier thing to say, and honestly, I think because we're in the West, this is why our therapy kind of took the direction it did, as opposed to the alternative, which would have been like, no, we're all directly responsible for ensuring the well-being of the person next to us and
Yeah.
your neighbor and the person across the street and the person 2 states over. And so I guess that would
Mhm.
be the first thing is really developing a deep understanding that it's our responsibility to make sure one another is good. And if someone isn't, it's not a flaw in them. It's pointing to something we're all collectively getting wrong that needs to be tweaked. Because I think that's the other thing is we have a lot of control over our built environment,
Mhm.
including what we consider the natural environment. Things that seem completely natural are typically built or at minimum influenced by human activity. And so if we can connect all those dots and kind of understand, I would love to see the future of care kind of take on this multi-level analysis, where I wouldn't even write off biomedicine as we practice it because honestly, it's
Mhm.
saved my life plenty of
Right.
times.
Right.
Breathing is, I don't know if you guys knew, but breathing's not really negotiable. And when it stops working, you don't have very long to get it back online before it becomes a problem. And so, like, shout out to biomedicine because
Yeah.
inhalers, after a 2 mile run where I thought I really had this and I didn't,
Yeah.
great, life-saving. Prednisone,
Yep.
fantastic. She's kept me out of the hospital so many times in the winter. Love her. Let's keep her right where she's at,
Mhm.
right? But also, there are things that we could do that aren't strictly limited to that level of like change your own personal diet, make sure you take this really rigorous medication routine. Like we can alter the environment, and then this is completely just me imagining, and part of my research is trying to see if this is even feasible. But
Mhm.
back through this lens of everything is spiritual, uh, this I mostly get off of my side of the internet, which is why I am trying to also prove it in an academic space, just to be sure. But there's also this idea floating around that illnesses are also energetic and spiritual. And so, on the physical level, take asthma, for example, we can say, okay, your lungs aren't working because, this piece of your lung is really irritated and it's making it hard for the muscle to work. It's a very physical explanation, right? But a
Mhm.
more emotional, spiritual explanation could be, yes, you have a lot of ancestral, intergenerational fear responses, which is paralyzing that part of your nervous system, and it's making the energy really stuck. And, just pulling from different traditions and how they conceptualize the body, it's like that's a whole other thing. And if that is true, maybe medicine, the way that we know it, is a temporary holdover where it's like, okay, we've diagnosed this thing. We understand this thing is
Mhm.
happening. Let's audit the environment, see what we can change. Let's keep you on this medicine because it'll keep you alive in the meantime. And let's address the underlying spiritual, emotional element, and maybe you might not even have that illness. You might, I don't know. This is like, there are going to be scientists, hundreds of years from now that are way smarter than me, hopefully building off of the things we do now that'll have a way more clear answer than what I do. But I think I just like the possibility of saying, like, there are so many ways to conceptualize the body, and we've been so limited in just one through this physical, individualized biomedical model
Mhm.
that the way we even conceptualize illnesses working, there might be so many other underlying mechanisms that we have no clue how they even work. And they might even give us better solutions, or it'll tell us
Mhm.
exactly what we need to change in, our lives, our home and family lives, our community lives, our, state, culture, society, global. Like there's so many levels to it where it's just like if we just look at it, I think that's
Mhm.
what. So to go back to the question of like, if I could imagine what does medicine look like in the future, it's being able to assess illness at all of these different levels and address it at every single level, every single time.
Mm. Gosh, yeah, it would be so incredible. Are there like any places in your life or just kind of in your research or knowledge or awareness where you're seeing some like little glimpses of this taking place now?
Yeah, I think it's happening in really tiny baby steps, but I kind of see it happening in the margins of academia. Like
Mhm.
Um, holistic medicine is one where, at the least, practitioners are kind of starting to question, like, okay, we're seeing these illnesses, and our first response is medication. Did we check mineral imbalances?
Mhm.
Did we check if there was an iron deficiency?
Mhm.
How is this person eating? What is their sleep like? What is their exercise routine like? And I think it's a very early step to take, but it's a bit further than we were a century ago. And so I kind of try to hold on to pieces like that. And then there's kind of indigenous healers that are also crossing over into academia a little bit that are really connecting to the spiritual, emotional aspects of illnesses. And they're like, well, this is how I treat illness because I'm conceptualizing it as a spiritual issue and not a physical issue. Um, I was part of a couple of mental health research labs that worked over in Nigeria for a while. And their approach was working with the community and taking kind of that indigenous healing medicine perspective and trying to mix it with a biomedical model. Let's see what else. So, yeah, like I think there are glimmers. There's kind of nutritionists and dietitians, and people are putting pieces together in isolation. I
Mhm.
haven't seen anything where it's all being pulled together, and certainly nothing that really scales to like a collective systemic level yet. But I see
Mhm.
kind of the wheels turning of people thinking like, is this really the right way to be talking about this issue? Like, what else is there? So I think we're kind of right on the precipice of kind of like a cultural paradigm shift of just how we ask and answer questions. I just don't think it's sticking yet. Like we haven't quite got all the way there.
Yeah, yeah, I know. And I wonder about, that like question of scale and scalability, which is always so tricky and can be slippery of being like, okay, is it like more related to geography and culture and place, of how we're approaching these things? Like, what does scale look like? But then it comes back to that idea of everything being so interconnected and being like, oh, but it just is. Like it is this big and it is this large. And like the degradation of the planet is this large and serious, and it's affecting everybody. And our health looks a certain way as a result of it, and where we are geographically, where we are like generationally, all of these things, our exposure to certain things, our levels of stress, what's being passed down through our genetics. Like it just goes and it goes and it goes. Yeah, I don't know. Like I'm left like thinking about and wondering kind of, um, yeah, it is like what do we do in the day to day? Like what is the small lever that we get to pull? What is that like medium lever that's maybe like, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 years out? What's that like massive lever that's like 500 years from now? Like, what's the big lever that's like so many generations from now that we're like working on these things and developing these things so that like life gets to exist in this really lush, full, beautiful, glorious way. It's like it's such good doing and thinking and being. I love your work so much. I'm like such a fan.
I will also say, I feel like the key to the thinking, because you're so right, like this whole question of scale versus day to day. Um, I get caught in that all the time, and I'm still trying to train my brain out of it. But one thing I've been really fortunate to learn in my academic nomadism is traveling through all these worldviews. Is that one thing we like to do, like super like to do here in the United States, is to be super binary in our thinking, where it's like either
Oof.
or and everything's oppositional. And we all do it. Like I am so guilty of this. Love geography and how it shapes who we are, even when you're challenging it. But
Mhm.
that's not how everybody in the world thinks, and that's not how all humans have thought throughout all history. And so,
Mhm.
anytime I catch myself getting stuck in this like either or battle, like, is it local? Is it scale? Is it daily? Is it 500 years from now? I'm like, what if it's
Mhm.
both? Like both and then what?
Mhm.
And I still like it doesn't always lead to answers, but it does get me out of the thought loop. And if nothing else, it might give me
Yeah.
an idea. And I don't know if any of my ideas are accurate or will ever play out, but it feels a lot better than being stuck in like this paralytic, like I don't know what to do because it doesn't feel big
Mhm.
enough, but then there are things right in front of me to get done right now. And I'm just like, I'm just gonna have to trust that both and. So if I do this one thing now right in front of me, you know, big butterfly effect, who knows? Maybe
Mhm.
maybe this podcast that we're doing right now will end up in an archive, and like the digital future AI tech babe academic,
Mhm.
whatever the system is 500 years from now, they're gonna listen to it and they'll do their analysis the same way we do of like the 18 and 1900s. We're like, this is what all our ancestors were thinking, those old fellas, and
Yeah.
they'll make fun of it the same way we do them. And we're like, oh, I can't believe you were ever stuck on that question. Like, isn't that just common sense by now? Who knows? Like, maybe we'll say one random word, and that's gonna be the future dissertation of like, here's how we create global world peace. And maybe it won't. Like this could just be a really massive cope, but
Mhm.
I'm happy to welcome you all into my strategy of coping with the world as it exists without getting stuck in it.
Oh yeah, no, I deeply appreciate it because yeah, the binary thinking is so ingrained. It's just like it's everywhere and so around us constantly. And getting out of it by just being like and both and. We can do it all, but not in that sense. But like, yeah, it's here.
Yeah. And I guess the other way I think of it too is like, if we think of our current global systems, the only reason we're even asking of like this question of scalability is because it's happening, right?
Hmm.
But think about it. It's happening without very much conscious thought. Like we're all just living our day-to-day lives. It's just this particular collection of patterns creates this global reality. So it's like,
Hmm.
okay, what collections of daily patterns would create a different global reality without me having to think about it? Like, do we have to think about it to choose what that thing is going to be?
Hmm.
Probably. But once we normalize that and create a new normal, then it's just like, you know, I just so happen to wake up and have a list of all my neighbors' allergies because that's just a daily thing we do because I bring all my neighbors cookies at the end of the week, but I make sure it's tailored to their dietary needs. Like, I don't know, maybe that creates world peace 600 years from now. And if not, you get some really cool connections with your neighbors and you get cookies. Like, win-win, right?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Yeah, I feel like the neighbor connects are like such a good starting point for anybody. Like the neighbor connection, like do it.
Hmm.
Just do it. Just talk to people who live around you, who maybe you don't know so well, and like build a relationship, form a relationship, get to know somebody new, get to know somebody who like you might not have a lot in common with, but like you live right across the street from them and you're down to chat and like wave and say hi and have some kind of like peripheral interaction every now and then. I feel like it is really such a good small lever starting place to like springboard off of.
Oh, definitely. And if we're talking about small levers to springboard off of, I would even say if that feels intimidating, because it did at one point to me, like I would
Hmm.
not have talked to a stranger, get really, really intimate with the people you're already close with. Like, I feel like maybe we're a little bit better at it now that we kind of popularized talking about mental health and, social media helps with these things. But
Hmm.
personal health is kind of still a little bit of a taboo, more or less. Get really, really, really into your best friend's business or your sister or your cousin. And it doesn't have to be like the nitty-gritty of their health records, right? But
Yeah.
check in. Like the
Hmm.
allergy list, I said it jokingly, but I so mean that. I have a little index card in my kitchen of like the 6 or 7 people that eat at my house the most often. I'm just like, what are
Hmm.
your allergies? And I will
Hmm.
completely allergy proof my kitchen every time you come here. And it's like everybody's got something. Like get to know
Yeah.
your people a little bit more and be very intentional about taking ownership about caring for them when they're in your space or like when you go to
Hmm.
their space. Because it seems really simple, and I think in some ways we do it organically, but I think there's a lot of ways we could deepen that. And then you get comfortable doing that with your immediate circle, which in theory should be low stakes. I mean, you already like the people well enough, right? And then
Yeah.
all of a sudden, the neighbor's not so scary. It's like I have a Rolodex of 12 people already that I'm like clocking in my head at all times that I care for. Like, care as a verb, action word. I am doing the caring as often as I can and like taking it from a feeling. And when you're doing that, caring as a feeling for your neighbor is like a lot lower of a lift at that point.
Hmm. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Like the check-ins are so good. Just the like popping in to say hi, see how you're doing. How's your day going? How's your week been? How's your body? How's this thing about you that I know has been going on or not? Like all of those little like wonderful, delicious little morsels of connection are so valuable. And if you're just like peppering them through your life, like that kind of care web is so special and important. I remember when I was having like a major series of health events last year, and I finally was like, I'm just gonna make a text message thread with like, my like 7, 8 closest people who are like, are you okay? And just like have it there on like speed dial so that when the next health event rolls in, I can be like, hello, back at the hospital, love you all, everything's gonna be okay, kind of stuff. Because it's just, It's nice to have those supports and networks and care systems in place and to build them up little by little. Same with like having social media as a place to connect with other people who maybe have similar conditions that you do or who are going through similar things as you or not, or to just see life and experience life through a different lens can be really valuable. And I think that
Mhm.
trying to like take the good with all of the other ick that can come with it can be a really solid way to connect as well.
Yeah. And I think another key too is like giving yourself permission to give care and also to receive care, right? I think
Hmm.
a big thing a lot of us do is we express care verbally and we kind of try to share our emotions. The action part can get kind of sticky, right?
Mm.
And I think it's because we have this culture of like niceties and politeness. We're like,
Yeah.
okay, like I'm thinking about you. I'm sending prayers. Let me know if you need anything because
Yeah.
we don't want to impose by forcing it, and then they don't want to impose by requesting the actual help. And so even like a really well, I wouldn't even say really easy because it'll probably be uncomfortable the first few times because it's just so countercultural. But it's
Hmm.
simple. It's just be like, I'm doing this. Let
Hmm.
me know. Like, the only let me know is like, tell me if there's a specific day that's okay, or like completely veto this. You don't want me in my in your space, but like put the burden on someone telling you no, because 9 times out of 10 people want to receive care. Like, hey
Yeah.
friend, I know you're going through this thing. I'm coming to do your dishes. I'm not
Hmm.
asking. You don't even have to think about it. You probably have something. I'm coming to do it. And then on the
Hmm.
flip side, if you're not in a position to give care, part of care networks is also receiving it because humans like to be reciprocal. And so part of us not wanting to burden people is because we feel like they haven't burdened us, even though it doesn't feel like a burden. It's like, oh, that person never needs anything. I don't want to impose on them. It's like going out of your
Hmm.
way to say, like, actually, it would be really helpful if, and give people a list. And like, if they say no, fine. And it, like, you're not entitled to it. If no one does it, it's fine. But also, you'd probably be surprised how many people are like eager to show up. If it's just like, I could really use support doing this. Anybody
Yeah.
game. Like,
Hmm.
just throw it out there. I had to start doing this with myself because I'm like hyper independent. I want to do all
Yeah.
the things and all the energy. I got it. I got it. And I had people
Hmm.
around me even asking, they're like, I want to help you, like, give me a task. And I had to step back and look at myself and just be like, hey, when people ask you if you need help and you say no,
Right.
when you could have used the help, that's on you. Like, that is you not doing your part of building community. And so it definitely goes both ways. But I
Yeah.
think like that assertive level of almost like, I'm going to love and care for you whether you like it or not. And most people will like it. But even if you don't, I'm going to do this for you. Like,
Yeah.
within reason. We like consent. We like boundaries. Too much of a good thing can become a bad thing in either direction. Please don't go knocking down your friends' doors. But
Yeah.
like, go offer to fold a load of laundry or something. I'm sure it'll be appreciated.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So relatable because it is just of the human condition. I mean, I remember when I had my first of two minor strokes and was like, "Oh, I like literally am bedridden and haven't had to endure this before aside from like surgery recoveries where I like know I'm going to be bedridden." But being like, oh my God, I can't even like get up and get my mail. I can't clean the cat litter box. I can't water the plants. I can't get up. Like, oh shit. And I'm living in a place where I don't have like any family. So, okay, I guess here I go. And like, it's like diving into the deep end of being like, hey, friend, could you bring my mail in? I'm like here, but I can't. Could you like come over and just like help with my dishes? Cause I can't. Like the basic stuff. And realizing that everybody in my life was like, yeah, when? Now? Like what? Like anytime. What do you need? And being like, oh yeah, because I would do the same. If one of my dear friends was like, I literally can't move, I would be like, I'll be your living helper. Like, what do you, just for as long as you need, whatever you need. Because we desire that as humans. We want to care for the people who we love, especially. And then generally, we really do want to care for each other and humanity
Mhm.
and other living things.
And okay, so this kind of goes back to what we're talking about of like where are the tools and like things we can use now.
Hmm.
We love capitalism, yay, sarcasm not. But what it did do is make us all feel really deeply that we have to be useful all the
Yeah.
time,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Use that. Just like instead of being useful to your boss, go be useful to your neighbor who has like a mobility limitation and bring up some
Hmm.
groceries. And if you struggle with asking for or accepting help, well, everyone likes to feel useful, like innately as humans. And also, that's one of the great gifts of our current cultural dynamic. We like being useful. Give your friends the gift of being useful today. They'll love it.
Oh my God, absolutely. Well, shoot, we are like up on the hour. I wanted to end with a question that I love to ask guests right at the tail end is that, when you imagine liberatory futures for those who are sick and disabled or otherwise, what do they look like? What do they feel like? What do they sound like, smell like? Like, how do you envision these?
Oh, I'm an earthy, crunchy kid from start to finish. And so it looks very green and fruitful. And it looks like a collaborative ecosystem
Mm.
between humans and everything else on this earth. And everything operating in its deepest capacity to support every other thing and operating in its deepest capacity, and a world being designed around that. And I think the only way we get there is that everybody can participate and everybody's taken seriously and everybody's needs are taken into consideration. And we all value doing that and make it a priority to do that all the time. And then from there, it looks like access and participation and deep intentional care and very, very green, and less separation between our plant and animal kin and the rest of us. Because I feel like we're really, really separated right now.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Dang, dude, my heart is like full. I can like feel it. It's like brimming and spilling over because it's just so, yeah, uh, on very similar pages, just like the most lush, glorious, true ecosystem. Oh, well, thanks again for being on the podcast and hanging out and talking about your work and thoughts and ideas and research and so awesome.
This has been really fun. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, I'll see you a little later. Is that tomorrow? Do we see each other tomorrow?
We do.
Yeah, we do.
I'm getting through the reading. We'll get there.
Yeah, we'll get there. All right. Okay, well, have a glorious day.
You too. Bye,
Uh-huh.
Charlie.
Bye. Wow. Okay. A giant thank you to Naya for that. It's just like absolutely beautiful and rich and nourishing and nurturing conversation. Gosh, yeah, for her research and experience and wisdom, just wow. Yeah, I love that we got into kind of how we conceptualize the body, especially through the interconnection of all things. I think it's so valuable. And just it having everything to do with how we understand illness and disability and who gets sick and why. And then, we bring in the spiritual and multicultural lens to those questions. And I think, we can really see how much that dominant biomedical framing can take hold, and mess some stuff up while also supplying us with life-saving medicine. It's just, it's not it's everything. It's everything. It's the yes and oh, yeah. Well, what an incredible episode. What an incredible person. Thank you all so much for listening. Thank you again to Naya Wright for being here today. This podcast is an experiment in sick time, in storytelling, and in imagining futures together. So, if you enjoyed this conversation, please share it. Please follow the show and stay tuned for more conversations with absolutely amazing sick and disabled thinkers, artists, organizers, you name it. Until next time, take care, rest when you need to, and remember, the future is sick.